Hi everyone, welcome to yet another virtual tasting. I kind of feel like I'm in The Godfather here. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Um, this is another great event for us, helping the Marlboro Public Schools music program, which as a product of the Marlboro Public Schools is something that is very meaningful to me. Although I wasn't a great musician, I certainly took music class and knew lots of great ones, and I know it's a very important program, and we want to continue to see it grow and keep going. We are, as I film this video, we are 5 days away from Christmas. I've got my Christmas tree in the background. I'm in the Marlboro location, which is what's known as our gifting central with all of our gift basket items. I've got my playoff beard going for the push here, so things are getting crazy. I'm actually excited to sit down for a little while here and drink some wine and talk for a little bit instead of running around. Just I like to go through a couple housekeeping items before we get into the eating and drinking. If you don't know me, if you haven't done one of these shows before, my name is Aykanian. I'm the general manager here at the Vin Bin. The Vin Bin is a wine and cheese shop, wine and cheese and craft beer and specialty liquors shop. We have 3 locations. We've got the one I'm in here in Marlboro, downtown Main Street, where it's kind of home base for us. This was our original, this town was the original location. Our original location was directly across the street next to Fish Restaurant. But here in the old fire station building, we've really thrived. We have a cafe in this location, and then we have one in Southborough, which is similar to Marlboro here with beer, wine, and liquor, and the cafe. And then we have a store in Hopkinton, which is where I'm situated most of the time. And in Hopkinton, we don't have the cafe, but we have a huge, great craft beer selection. We've got all the nice cheeses, and we have the wine, of course. So that's what we do here at the Vin Bin. The holiday season is big for us. We're big on gift baskets. If you haven't done it, if you didn't get one this year, think about us for next year for any special occasions. I think we're going to end up this December somewhere around 350, 400 gift baskets for the season. So it's a pretty crazy time, needless to say. So let's get to eating and drinking, shall we? My selections here were kind of based with the holidays in mind and with holiday events and parties. We picked 3 red wines that we thought were really crowd-pleasing, price-friendly, really versatile wines you can have with or without food, and a couple of cheeses that are kind of the same, sort of crowd-pleasing, easy-to-eat cheeses, but still really delicious. Let's go over quickly what we have in our bag. So let's do the cheeses first. You've got 2 cheeses in there. The white cheese in the square packaging. This is the Milton Creamery Old Style Cheddar. You have the Beamster Signature Gouda, 12-month age Gouda. You've got a box of great crackers in the Trésors, the crispy wafers, my favorite. You've got one of a couple selections of chocolate here. You either have the toffee sea salt and pretzel bar from Chocolatology, or you have the dried cranberry pumpkin seed, both really cool. And then for wines, we have 3 reds today. You have the Valdemoreda Mulberry Creek Tempranillo. You have the Finca El Origen Malbec, and you have the Ali Toscana. Okay, so 3 reds. Just to give you guys an idea of how I set up, I just set up with a little. I'm kind of crude. I just do a little bit of cheese cut up, and one glass. I got my 3 reds ready to go, and I got my bucket. Okay, because unlike you guys, I'm not partying. I gotta get ready for. I'm technically working. This is like a job, so I can't really drink all of it. I spit, and when you go to when you're professionally tasting, you spit out your wine. But you guys aren't gonna spit at home. You're gonna enjoy the wine. We're gonna start off with the Spanish red, the Valdemoreda. Okay, so this is kind of a cool wine. We've just found this before the, in the last couple of months. It's a brand new, sort of a newer wine for us, and it's 100% Tempranillo. Tempranillo is the main grape grown in Spain. It's the most widely planted Spanish red. You'll see it if you see the word Rioja on a bottle. It's almost all Tempranillo. Sometimes it'll just be labeled Tempranillo. This one is actually not labeled Tempranillo at all, just labeled Tinto. Now let's go through before we before we go into the wine, let's talk about tasting wine. So here's just the bare bones of the way I taste wine, okay? So you taste wine by, first you taste it with your eyes, okay? So you have to look at this wine, and you're sort of evaluating it. You're looking at the color. I mean, for me, I'm looking at the color here, and you can see sort of around the rim, it's very clear. It's not super dense, this color. It really fades out towards the end of the, so at the end of it there. And in the middle of the glass, it's a little bit deeper in purple, so it's got a kind of a lighter color, almost. And I kind of expect this with Tempranillo. This is sort of, especially of this style, is pretty indicative. It's pretty common. You smell it. Okay, so the first nose, sometimes you don't get it a lot, so what you do is you wake it up. So we swirl the glass. You see us snooty wine people swirling our glass. We're not doing it just to look cool. Some people do, but you swirl it and you're sort of aerating it, and you're waking up the wine, and then you smell it again. And that second nose, I get a really big nose of cherry, almost like a cherry cough drop in a good way, like a Luden's cough drop. It was like my favorite one as a kid. I would just eat them as candy and pretend I was sick and hope my mom got me some. It kind of reminds me of that, like a little cherry lollipop. Little tip, I was opening these wines earlier and reminded me of being at a restaurant. So if you ever go to a restaurant, sometimes you order a bottle of wine and the server brings it over to you, and they open it and they give you the cork, right? Well, I don't smell the cork when I go to. Some people smell the cork. I don't smell the cork when I go to a restaurant, because the cork is a piece of it's just a piece of dead wood, basically, and that's what it's going to smell like. Smell the glass, smell the wine, and what they're doing there is they're trying to get you. All you're trying to determine in that is if the wine is flawed or corked, and you'll know that if you've never smelled a corked bottle of wine before. You'll know it because it's going to smell like your basement does when it floods, or when you have a bunch of cardboard that's gotten wet. That's exactly what it smells like. And sort of the cork kind of smells like that because it's wet and it's old wood. So I never smell the cork. I only smell the wine. I don't taste it either. Because the taste is subjective, right? I might like it, I might not, but I can tell it's flawed by the nose. So I give it a smell and I tell the waiter it's all set. That's like my baller move. I'm married now, but if I was going to show off to my wife before we're married, that's what I would have done. But I digress. So let's look at. So like I said, a lot of cherry in this wine. Let's give it a sip, and then you take a little sip, right? So I'm swirling the wine around my mouth, trying to get it all over, touching all my taste buds in my back of my tongue, the front, all over my mouth. And this is a wine that is a really, I think, kind of a sleepy, really cool, good wine. I mean, it's got a lot of fruit. It's juicy. It's lush. It's not super tannic. This is a really drinkable wine. I mean, I could see this as a great party wine. Really could just like pass this around the room and everybody would like it. I could see this as a great wine to pair with simple sort of weeknight food like great burgers, barbecue, that kind of thing. Tempranillo is kind of in a lot of ways, sometimes in the Pinot Noir world, and this is kind of like that. You can see it's a lot light. The color's light. It's light in texture. It's not heavy and syrupy and rich. It's got a really soft, sort of flowing texture to it. Not a lot of tannin. Doesn't grit my mouth really in a good way. I don't want a wine like this to do that. I want this to be just a quaffing, sort of appetizer-friendly wine, and I think it's a really nice little representation of that. I dig this wine. This would be also a really cool wine and a fun one to make like a mulled wine with, or it's a great wine to cook with while you're, if you need like a little bit of wine and a sauce or something. Wines like this are great with that because they're not, again, it's not overly aggressive. It's a nice balanced red. I'm really liking this. And it's not just all fruit. It's got a little backbone of almost like a graphite-y sort of pencil shavings kind of thing going on, which is keeping it honest, keeps it balanced. Very interesting wine. Like it quite a bit. So let's switch gears to cheese just for a little bit, and we'll kind of go in strength. We'll start with the cheddar. This is the Milton Creamery Old Style Cheddar. Now, Milton Creamery is probably our best-selling cheese producer we work with. They're out of Iowa. They are a Mennonite family, and they make a cheddar called the Prairie Breeze, which if you've been to the Vin Bin, you might know it's actually our #1 selling cheese. Well, it's so #1 selling that in our biggest holiday push of the week, we couldn't get it. There's none in stock. So we went with their old style cheddar, which is this one. And actually, if you talk to the people at Milton Creamery, they actually, a lot of them will tell you that this is actually the cheese that they love the most. And although it is a basic, no frills cheddar, it's a labor of love, and it's a really flavorful representation. In many ways, any cheesemaker can make a really, in your face, sharp, honkin' aged cheddar, but this is just a really sort of younger, creamier, milder style that you can't hide your flaws in. Now, if you look at it, it's got this really pretty white color to it. It's really pure looking, and it sort of crumbles apart. I'm breaking it apart here. So it's like almost jagged in there. It actually will show you sort of the way this cheese breaks. It kind of will show you what cheddar is. So a cheddar is a process. It's not necessarily a cheese. So in the process of cheddaring, what they do is they actually press these cheeses down and they cheddar it. That's what it's called. They press it down into molds and sort of compact it into shape. So you can have cheddars that are made with goat's milk, cow's milk, sheep's milk. You can have cheddars of all. There's a lot of things that can be called cheddar, but it's sort of when it breaks apart, you can just sort of see how it's just a lot of curd just compacted together. On the palate, really creamy, dense. It's kind of like, I equate this cheese to sort of this is exactly what an American cheddar is supposed to taste like. It's got just enough balance of savory, sweet, sharp, and it makes you want to keep going back for it. You can do a lot with this cheese. It's a great melting cheese. Put it in a grilled cheese and you're set. I use it in scrambled eggs a lot. I grate it up and just toss a tablespoon or whatever into a couple of scrambled eggs, and it's amazing. Breakfast sandwiches, or I just cube it up and snack on it like I'm doing right now. In fact, I have some at home right now, and when I get home from here, I'm probably going to have it for dinner. But a really, really excellent cheese. We call this, in the store, we actually don't call it the old style cheddar. We actually call it the Vin Bin house cheddar, because that's kind of the way we think of it. This is exactly this is your house cheese, because everybody has house cheese, right? So let's move on to the next wine. So our next wine is a popular one, the Finca El Origen Malbec. Okay. Now, let's talk Malbec, right? Malbec is a grape, incredibly popular. I'm sure you've had a Malbec. I'm sure you've bought Malbec. I'm sure you're into it, right? Most people have had Malbec like this, which is from Argentina. Okay, this is from Mendoza, kind of the homeland of Malbec. But Malbec is actually originally a French grape. It's actually one of the 5 Bordeaux grapes. It's one of the only 5 grapes that's allowed to be in a Bordeaux wine label Bordeaux. It was for many years, only grown in France. For many years, that's where you bought it. And then in the 50s, they had a really terrible frost in the mid 50s in Bordeaux, and lots of the Malbec was kind of killed off, and it was actually slowly replaced by Merlot, which is kind of its half cousin anyways. And Merlot they just thought was easier to deal with, easier to grow, easier to cultivate, and it kind of died off. They still use it. A lot of places still use it. It's still grown in Bordeaux, but you don't see it a ton. Where you do see it in France is a place called Cahors, where that's basically any red wine you get from Cahors is Malbec, and those are really fun. They're very difficult to find. It's hard to get, hard to find good ones in the United States, but we do have them sometimes, and they're fun. They're really good. But in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, Malbec became incredibly popular, being grown in Argentina. It kind of found a home there, and it was sort of the Catena family, if you've seen their labels on names on a label of wine, sort of really brought the grape and cultivated it, and now it's like it's their entire wine production, their entire wine business in Argentina is Malbec. And now you can find Malbec grown in just about every place in the world that grows red wine, grows Malbec. Very popular wine. Now, the Finca Malbec is a wine we've worked with for quite a few years now. It's an awesome value. The price point's great. It's routinely rated very highly. We don't care a ton about scores, but we do pay attention to them. This sees 95 points from Decanter magazine. Pretty much, I mean, this is a 90 to 95 point wine year in, year out for the money is kind of silly. Immediately when I poured this wine out, the color was so different than the first wine. Okay, so when I tip this glass, this deep dark purple color creeps all the way out to the rim of the pour. Okay, this is way denser. You can't see through it at all. Can't see my fingers through it. So you can tell, sort of, as a wine drinker, you can look at this wine and you sort of know, you kind of know which direction it's going to go in. You kind of know, you can see the flavor. Okay, sometimes this wine looks purpley and dense, and I know what this is going to be like. So let's give it a nose. Yeah, and on the nose, a lot of that cherry and dark fruit notes, but more of a cooked cooked cherry, cooked red fruit, like a jam, like a bubbling jam on your stovetop, and then on a little swirl. Now when you swirl it and you get a little more air into it, there's a little more layers to it. I get a little more of an earthy, leathery component, a little more of a spice coming through. So you can see on the label of this, there's a sort of fossil on the front there, and so the valley where this was grown, what they'll tell you was once an ocean, and now it's a mountain range. So those soils are oceanic, so they do have some mineral quality to them that comes through in the wine, which always adds a nice layer. Let's give this one a little sip. Wow. So I opened these wines about maybe half an hour ago, and I poured a little bit of each just to go through them quickly. And I have to tell you that in just a half an hour, this wine has really opened up. This is now sort of coating my mouth in that jammy red fruit. There's some roasty mocha, sort of that like roasted coffee backbone to it, which is pretty consistent with a good Argentine Malbec. I mean, a really developed, layered red for really good money. This is a pretty nice wine. This is a pretty nice wine. This is higher acid than the first wine. Much more grip and strength. So you can feel that sort of drying quality, that sort of that grip on the side of your tongue and in your mouth. That would indicate to me that this is a wine that needs, would crave a hearty meal. In Argentina they eat lots of red meat, lots of grilling, and this would be a great wine for something off the grill, a steak, or some pork chops even would be really nice, something like that. But this is a nice, interesting red. I'm digging this. One thing I want to tell you guys is I'm honest, right? So like I've had this wine before. I haven't had it in a long time. This tonight is the first time I'm tasting this wine in, I don't know, probably 2 years, 3 years. So I'm reacting honestly with you. This is kind of fun for me because I get to try wines that I haven't drank in a while, or wines that I haven't seen in a little bit. So I hope you appreciate the honesty. Before we go on to the next cheese, I just want to go over these chocolates real quick. I'm not going to eat these right now in front of you because I don't want to make too much of a mess. But we have two different styles here from Chocopology. So Chocopology is a really cool it's a really cool project from a guy named Fritz. I'm gonna butcher his name, okay? It's Fritz Nipschilt, and he's a American chocolatier. It's been kind of going on since the late '90s. He's based out of Connecticut. So these chocolates have been featured everywhere. They are, I mean, they're kind of legendary. They were in Oprah's favorite things. They've won good food awards from the Specialty Foods Conference and in the Specialty Foods Association. They have been all over the Food Network. This guy beat Bobby Flay in a throwdown once. I mean, so they're legit. They're awesome. These got some really unique flavors. They're all fair trade, organic. So the dried cranberry, pumpkin seed, and nuts is obviously it's got all those things in it, and it's also a vegan bar as well. But you'd never know. It's got that really nice hearty flavor from the dried cranberries, that little tartness. It's a dark chocolate, 75%. The pumpkin seeds add that really earthy crunch, and then the other one, the toffee sea salt pretzel, my wife's favorite. So this is 72%, so another dark chocolate, and this has toffee and pretzel bits. See, those pretzels had that salty, sweet combination and a little more crunch. I would recommend having chocolate with this Malbec here. Would be a really great combo. And then also, before we get into the cheese, just the crackers. Again, I'm not going to eat here because they're not super exciting, but this is the Trésors cracker. I use these in every tasting that we've done. This is my favorite cracker that we sell. I am a huge proponent of basic, unflavored crackers with cheese. I want to taste my cheese. I don't need to taste the cracker. The cracker is a vessel just to get the cheese into my mouth. Just a little sea salt, like is on these, is all I need. They're light, and these are perfect. They're the perfect weight for everything. They're sturdy enough to handle a hard cheese, but they're delicate enough to go with something soft and creamy. They're great. That's my favorite. If people didn't want, some people like other crackers, but if it was just me, I'd fill our shelves with this and just say this is the only cracker you get. Okay. Now, the next cheese, our second cheese, is the Beemster Signature Gouda. Okay, Beemster is like a big time name in cheese. They are a major producer. They're out of Holland, of course, making Gouda. They're one of the big boys of imported cheese. So this is their 12-month Gouda. This is only aged for a year, but it's got really great development on it. So you can see on this piece, you can kind of see it. You see those little white specks, right? So a lot of people think those are salt crystals. It's not salt crystals. It's actually calcium. It's actually as it ages, the calcium crystallizes, and that's what gives you that texture, that crunch. And people love that. That's the best part of an aged cheese. You only get it with really aged cheeses. Now, Gouda is something we carry we have lots of different Goudas. Ranging from, this is a 12-month, we have an 18-month, and we have a 5-year. Sometimes we have a 3-year. We have a coconut Gouda. We have mustard seed Goudas. We've had pumpkin-flavored Gouda. We've had every Gouda there is, okay? But this kind of Gouda is definitely the most popular. So, one of maybe the oldest cheeses in the world. The first mentions of Gouda go back to like the 1100s. It's one of the oldest recorded mentions of cheese. So, these guys have been making cheese since 1901, so they've been doing it for a pretty long time. This is really classic. It has tons of caramel, butterscotch notes to it. Hearty texture, really full-bodied. You got to kind of work it. You got to work with this cheese to get it down. Sweet. A little nutty, very rich, really well done. This is this kind of reminds me, it's funny, this cheese is actually closer to the 5-year aged Gouda than it normally would be. The only thing missing is the hard texture, but I like it a little creamier like this one is. Really great cheese for dessert. One thing that's kind of hard about cheese is to pair cheese with coffee. Coffee's a really I love to have coffee after dinner, but I also like to have cheese for dessert. So it's hard to manage those two things together. So the only cheeses that goes well with coffee is an aged Gouda like this, because it has that sweetness, that butterscotchy note. So just think about that next time you're going to try to serve a cheese course for dessert. Now, so really nice one. What can you do with Gouda? Well, Gouda is great just to snack on like this. A younger Gouda like this is also fun to cook with. It melts great. You can shave a little bit onto a salad. You can just use it in a. Actually, you could use this in a like a pie crust instead of a cheddar. It would add a really cool little flavor. So that's a very different one, but pretty classic Gouda. Great pairing with a red wine. Very hard in general to pair cheese and red wine. I know we all think it's the greatest thing in the world, but actually it can be very difficult because cheese is very fatty, and red wine is also has a lot of tannin. It's not as crisp. A lot of times white wine actually is superior. So you need an aged cheese like this one to go with the red wine. It's not as fatty. It's not as creamy. So when we look for cheese with red wine, we like something like this. Now we're going to do our last wine here because we're coming up on time. This is the Ali Toscana. Rick calls this the Muhammad Ali wine, obviously because of the name. Now Toscana is obviously from Tuscany. This is Italian. This is mostly Sangiovese, which is the same grape they use in Chianti. This is a 90% Sangiovese, 10% Cab. Okay, let's evaluate this one. So I would say in density, this is probably between the first two. I can see through it, but it is darker than the first red. It has a little more of a ruby sort of brickish color along the edge, which is pretty typical for Sangiovese. Now, on the nose, I can actually smell more of a tart fruit, more of a cranberry pomegranate kind of thing going on. More of like a leather jacket thing. Let's get a little more air into this, see what else we can get. This has more of a, what we like to call here, a barnyard quality, which I love. Has a little farminess to it. There's a little gaminess on the nose here, almost like walking through a cow pasture even. I'm not going to get too graphic. So, way more acid than the first two. Much more acidity. Again, pretty typical of Sangiovese. So when you talk about Italian wine, one thing about Italian wine is they really build wine to go with food. You know, they're not, it's very much a. This one is probably would be okay with it, but in general, these Italian reds aren't the kind of wine that we in America, we just sit on the couch and kind of watch TV and sip a wine. This is something they want you to eat with, because of the acidity, you need something to balance it. And a lot of times these wines don't show great at tastings because of that fact. They're not as goopy, and they don't have as much dark red fruit to grab you. They need to be finessed a little bit. Now this one has a little more dark fruit. It's got a little juicier quality to it, but it does have some grip and texture. It does have some acidity. They had a little Cabernet in this to kind of beef it up a little bit and give it a little more depth and probably, honestly, to make it a little more marketable to the American palate, where we like things a little bit more in your face and we kind of want to grab you, and you need something a little more hefty and beefy. But it's a really solid little Sangiovese. I would call this sort of a baby Chianti. It's not fully like Chianti. It's a little more fruit forward than that, but like for me, and you guys who have watched these videos before, you know I'm big on on something I call a pizza wine. This is a pizza wine. This is a Tuesday night. You come into the Vin Bin, you grab a bottle of this, you pick it up a pizza from down the street, and you're just gonna go home and not have to worry about it. It's just a simple pairing, but it's gonna be good every time. I always have pizza wines in my back pocket. If you see me in the store and you need to know, like, I need a quick wine for dinner tonight, it doesn't always have to be pizza. That's just what I call it. Just a weeknight, Tuesday night wine. I'll always be able to hand you something under 20 bucks. Simple, easy to go, easy to do. Let's give this one more try here. Yeah. So, 3 really good reds, really approachable, crowd pleasers. Anybody can get into them, and great starter wines too. If you've never had a Malbec if you've never had a Spanish Red, if you've never had a Sangiovese, these are awesome to start with because they're great representations of the style. Well, we've made it to the end of the tasting. I hope everybody has a safe and healthy and happy holiday season. I hope to see you all in the store soon, and I hope the Marlboro Public Schools music program continues to thrive for years and years and years. We're happy to be able to partner with you on this. Thanks for joining me.